for me, living life so merrily. It's so easy, can't you see? Polka, polka, that's for me. Polka, polka, everyone come along.
Miguel Durrani back here with the Talk and Shoot podcast, and this is our retro boxing Talk and Shoot, which means, as always, or as forever, I will have Michael Davis and Dave Sidursky here by my side. How you guys doing?
Great. How you guys doing?
Really good, Miguel. Love this. I love talking about this stuff.
And, this one's really going to be one that I think we're going to look back on and have some fun on, because Dave has been joining us for a few of these podcasts, and we've been talking about mythical boxing, which is what Dave's site does. And we're going to really kind of dedicate this podcast to the mythical boxing theme. And we're going to make up a couple of fights in across time periods, really, from different eras, and match them up. Let Dave use his simulator and work his magic here. And we'll have some fun. Dave, go ahead and plug your site if you want to give the URL. And if you recall, let's go ahead and plug the simulator there, because that's something that, we make a lot of good use of here in this podcast, and I'm sure you do as well in mythical boxing.
Yes, and the simulator is called Titlebout Championship Boxing. Unfortunately, I don't have the website in front of me, but if you do a Google search on Titlebout Championship Boxing, the link will come up. My group is Mythical Boxing. We're small but a dedicated group of boxing enthusiasts. A lot of great knowledge in the forum. We just reached the 100-member mark.
And that's awesome. I'd like to see that, go to 1,000 and even more, because, it's really, I think, keeping the history of boxing alive in a way, because you're actually talking and making discussions and agreements and disagreements, and forcing people to look up things, forcing people to go back and really, get into things. And I think there's a whole history there that's still kind of waiting to be unearthed in terms of boxing. So I'm very appreciative of the site. I know Mike likes to spend a lot of time there, and anytime you can get Mike to read is amazing.
Well, Miguel, there's a lot of pictures there. I'm not really sure what those funny characters underneath that are, but the pictures I like.
That's nice. Yeah, there's definitely some good members out on there as well. But let's get right into this, because we're gonna lead off. We got this coming weekend. We got Gennady Golovkin fighting David Lemieux at Madison Square Garden, HBO pay-per-view. It's a big fight in terms of, Golovkin's becoming a big star. It's a pay-per-view fight, which he has not been on pay-per-view in the United States like that as a main eventer yet. And Lemieux is one of those guys that's a hard hitter, and no one sees this fight going 12 rounds. So we've got Gennady Golovkin, really the class of the middleweights in most people's eyes right now. And we're going to match him up with Marvin Hagler, an all-time great, and, there's no denying that. And I'm going to let Dave take it away with his description first.
Okay. All right, so Hagler versus Golovkin. What the simulator came up with was a shockingly one-sided affair from the beginning, as Triple G was just too green and too inexperienced to contend with the Marvelous One. Marvelous Marvin boxes him cleverly, picks him apart with clean, accurate punches over the first 6 rounds. Triple G keeps looking for the big shot, but is simply unable to land one against Hagler. A Triple G left hook snaps Hagler's head back in the 7th. However, Marvelous Marvin shakes it off and goes on about his business. By the end of the 8th, Golovkin is badly swollen around both eyes. Hagler sends him to the canvas in the 9th with a left uppercut. Triple G is game, but doesn't have a leg under him. The referee steps in and stops the fight. Hagler wins by a 9th round technical knockout.
Wow. Michael, what'd you think?
When you look at those numbers, because they're so one-sided.
Well, we haven't gotten to the numbers yet, but you want to go right into the numbers? Go ahead and read them off, Mike.
Let's do the numbers.
Well, you do them, Mike.
Yeah, and, this was all based on 100 simulations. Hagler won 94 of the 100, which, surprisingly lopsided. Golovkin won only 5. There was 1 draw. 79 Hagler's wins were by stoppage. stoppage. The average was around 9 rounds, accounting for the outcome. Hagler outlands Triple G by a ratio of almost 2 to 1. It lands 41% of his punches compared to only 24 for Golovkin. And very one-sided simulation.
Now that's really interesting. Now let's consider that right now Golovkin is on many of the pound-for-pound best fighter lists right now. But what does that really tell us about this, Mike?
Well, this is what I think. And when I first saw those numbers, my immediate thing was to go, no, that's not right. But then, when you really look at it, Hagler's never been stopped before. In 60 some odd fights, the guy's never been knocked out. And Triple G is a knockout artist. And when you say, relatively inexperienced, in my opinion, when somebody's got 30 plus pro fights, they're no longer inexperienced. They're a wolf. And especially when you look at his pound for pound rankings. But, in today's day and age, as compared to when Hagler was fighting, there certainly is a discernible difference in talent. Even though Triple G, I think we can all agree on, is, a very, very talented fighter in any era. But, yeah, those numbers actually make sense to me. At first I wanted to say no. But, then when you kind of do the math, Hagler's one of the, greatest fighters, of our era.
Yep, and Golovkin's just not there yet is what this tells you. Here's the thing is, the simply too green and inexperienced line in the simulation and in the write-up, yeah. But I think you could replace that by just, I think Hagler is a superior athlete, and he's a guy with better technique at the end of the day. And Golovkin has some holes in his game. We did a podcast with Montel Griffin, the world champion, WBC world champion, blah, 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 in the light heavyweights. And he doesn't like Golovkin's style. He thinks Golovkin's hittable. He thinks, Willie Monroe backed him up. Willie Monroe, he said, and it's known, is not a big puncher. And, Willie Monroe had his moments there. And a good fighter who can get to Golovkin is going to be able to hit him and hurt him because defensively he's not really that great. And, his chin is still suspect in terms of, not suspect, but untested. And it's something that Hagler would certainly test that, you know what I mean? And Hagler's a guy who, though he's not making the top 10 pound-for-pound best list, usually, of all time, usually the ones I've seen out there have Hagler in the top 25 or so.
Without a doubt.
And that's a situation where, Golovkin really is just not there yet. And then you take into account other things. Montel, I think, put some thought into it, too, and I think he's right. When you consider competition level and a few of those things, Golovkin, and here's the other part of it that I find interesting is Golovkin's 33 right now, so, I mean, in general, he could be said to be leaving his prime. So,
yeah.
So at some point, we're going to see a drop-off here, and he's a guy with some mileage because of his huge amateur career, so he's not, Lemieux in the fight coming up has 7 years of youth on him, and sometimes that could tell. So Gennady Golovkin is probably not going to be around for 10 more years, kind of thing.
We've probably got about 2 more years out of him. We've probably got about 3 or 4 fights left.
He's come to us a little bit late in the sport, and it would have been great to see him develop without the weirdness of, so many amateur fights and so much amateur background that, you come to the, again, to use a Montel Griffin.
Amateur pro.
Yep, you're basically a professional amateur fighter. And he comes with a certain level of preparation and lets him get to this level. He's good. So right now he's the top middleweight, and he also comes in at a time where the middleweights technically are really in a flat situation where there's no real crossover star. So what you have here with Golovkin is a guy who right now is getting blown up by the media and an idol, but a guy who, when it comes down to it and you put him, to the real test, I think he's coming up short in terms of resume, basically. Dave?
Yeah, he's an unknown to a large degree. You've seen so many undefeated fighters over the years. Mike Tyson comes to mind as a everybody back in the late 80s would have probably had Mike Tyson within the top 5 of their, top heavyweights of all time. Once history plays out, you have a very different story. And there is a lot that we still just don't know about Triple G. I would have expected, a Hagler win doesn't surprise me at all here. The fact that it was so one-sided did surprise me. But yeah, overall, I would expect Hagler to win this one.
Yeah, no, I think in the long run, even if Golovkin goes on and, challenges some future records and puts some big fights in, which, there's still potential for big fights. You've got, Canelo waiting in the wings here. You've got the winner of the upcoming Jacobs Peter Quillen fight. So Golovkin's got a little bit of, and then, moving up, there could be other potential big fights. I think he'd be foolish to chase Andre Ward, especially because Ward may be heading up to light heavyweight, though that's considered a big fight. But he can move up to super middleweight where there's a lot of competition. I think he can clean out like Arthur Abraham and make some big fights. And he wants to be an international icon. Even with all that, if his career goes as great as it could be, I don't know if he's going to ever get to the point on a pound-for-pound list as Marvin Hagler. I think Hagler would have won this fight. From everything we know, the simulation did surprise me a little bit in the one-sided nature of it. But that's what we do the podcast for, to really look into it and let's see what Golovkin does this weekend, because I think the bottom line is if he gets hit by Lemieux the way he got hit by Willie Monroe, we may see some stuff.
Yes. Anyway,
let's head on to the next fight here. We got. We're going to take a look at Floyd Mayweather Jr., the recently retired, TBE, as he is fond of telling you. And he's facing Sugar Ray Leonard, who I know Dave has a soft spot in his heart for him. And I'll let him take it away with the written description first.
Okay, this one could get interesting. So the simulator says...
And what weight is this one simulated at?
147.
147, okay.
147. So in a battle of divas, Mayweather has a slight edge over the first 5 rounds. Sugar Ray has a hard time penetrating his defense. However, from the 6th round on, Sugar Ray asserts himself as the bigger, stronger man. He turns the tide by working his jab, which bothers Mayweather and pounds into the body. Mayweather simply doesn't have the power to keep Sugar Ray Leonard off. His crafty defensive skills allow him to remain upright and avoid Leonard's most powerful blows. Leonard drops Mayweather in the 15th to put a stamp on a convincing decision victory. 146, 139, 146, 139, 146, 140 on the judges' scorecards. Leonard wins by a unanimous decision.
And real quick, wrap up the numbers on the simulator, the 100 fights.
Yeah, so the numbers... the numbers support the description. Leonard wins 76 out of 100. Mayweather wins only 17. There are 7 draws. 42 of Leonard's wins are by decision. 34 are by stoppages. Leonard outlands Mayweather an average of 24 to 17 per round. Connect percentage is about equal. And Sugar Ray scores twice as many knockdowns. This one I agree with wholeheartedly.
Go ahead, tell us why.
And this is one that this was the first mythical matchup that I ever did, and I watched extensive film on both guys. I just think it's a good big man versus a good little man. Mayweather does not have the power to hurt Sugar Ray Leonard. Sugar Ray Leonard does have the power to hurt Floyd Mayweather. Mayweather has trouble with guys who can jab. Example, Oscar De La Hoya. Leonard had a pretty good one. Leonard is just as fast as Floyd Mayweather, if not faster, and I just think, Ray wears him down over the course of the fight, and it's not even close, and I believe he would win by a late round stoppage.
I agree with you, Dave, and I almost feel that it'll be interesting one day if we could do like a Floyd Mayweather versus like a Salvador Sanchez or like a true 130-pounder, and get a different feel, because it really exposes you to a completely different Mayweather in terms of capabilities. I think at welterweight he's just a small welterweight, and he's a welterweight who really, for business reasons, did the whole weight class thing where I think he's even held a belt in the weight class above welter. And, that's a situation where, if you're grabbing belts and you can say 5 times, 6 times, 5 weight class, 6 weight class, wherever you are, it's a marketing situation, and he monetizes very well. We all know that. So, but I just don't see him being able to hang with the true great welterweights of all time when it comes down to it, and he's fighting at that weight class. Interestingly, I think this fight has a real potential to be a real boring fight, too. Because Sugar Ray was also very much a strategist at the end of the day. And Mayweather would come into this fight, with a strategy, looking to, hit and run or, test Sugar Ray's speed. I think that would, Dave mentioned he thinks Sugar Ray Leonard is just as fast. I don't know that there's a real true way to measure that. Obviously, I respect Dave's opinion, but I don't know if there's a real true way to measure that. And I think in the long run that Mayweather, relies heavily on his conditioning and his ability to, use his body the way he does in a boxing match. And I don't know that he wouldn't be able to get through a few matches on a simulation. That I have 100 fights that for him to lose 17, I almost feel like that should be closer. And I'm not a big Mayweather fan. I see these guys, both of them is a lot alike in terms of the strategy and the way they fight. I
do have one question, though. Those 17 wins that Mayweather got, how many of those were in Vegas, Dave?
All of them.
There you go, Miguel.
Yeah, and
that answers your question.
And if you put old Kenny Bayless in as the referee, then you got to give Mayweather another 5.
Yeah, I think it's what they refer to that on the south side of Chicago as a CON-spiracy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's nice. Is that how is Chicago nowadays? Is it?
Well, the last 2 weeks we've had over 130 heroin overdoses that were laced with fentanyl. So always exciting here. That's
interesting stuff because now I heard Spike Lee is out there filming a movie that's got everybody pissed off because it's named Chirac.
You know what? He acquiesced and eventually caved to the powers that be and changed the name. But yeah, that wrapped up. And oddly enough, the overwhelming majority of that film was not filmed in the more impoverished areas, which is crazy.
Well, you can't go to those places.
No. You know what? He's smart not doing that. I agree. But to extend the conversation on this, I actually agree with you guys. I think like if you really look at this fight as a whole, this might be like the lowest punch count for a championship fight in the history of boxing. I mean, you got essentially 2 dedicated strategists and counterpunchers, and I always kind of wondered who would become the lead puncher in this fight. And I'm like, you got 2 guys that are going to refuse to budge on that.
I think Ray would take the lead in it. I think that.
You think so?
Yeah, Ray Leonard is a. Ray Leonard, yeah, he's known as a boxer, but he would trade with you in the pocket. He was a pretty good infighter too, and I think the man could punch. The left hook he hit Davey Boy Green with, nearly tore his head off.
Yeah, I see that as well. I think in the long run, especially at welterweight, you can't give Mayweather much credit for offense. It's a pick and choose kind of thing with him, whereas Leonard really had the full diversity available to him, and he displayed it in his fights. He did have a tendency to, once the fight was already in his pocket and stuff, he liked to brawl. He liked to also show off that part of it. And, Mayweather really did not display that, even when he was, ahead in fights and in fights where he had already established he really couldn't be hurt by the other guy, and he still didn't go for it. Whereas Leonard did have that killer instinct where he'd come in and try to finish. I would credit him that way as well. But I'm not sure I wouldn't give Mayweather another couple of fights on the simulation. But I think that one's a good one for discussion.
In the future, I'd like to see Mayweather and Pernell Whitaker. I know we've kicked that around a few times, in past conversations. But I'd like to see how the simulator, how that rolled out those numbers.
That would be interesting.
Yep, I agree. I agree. We got a couple of fights there that we may want to do going down the line, then, and switch Mayweather around in weight classes and really test his his place in history. See how it goes. The next fight's another couple of guys that fall into these discussions frequently. And you got Manny Pacquiao, who I guess we're going to acknowledge is the number 2 guy in the world over the last few years here behind Mayweather, and all-time great Alexis Arguello. Now this one was a close simulation. Dave, why don't you take it away?
Arguello versus Pacquiao. Pacquiao dominates over the first 5 rounds, dropping Arguello in the first with a straight left and confounding him over the first 5 rounds with his quick hands and movement. By the end of the 5th, Arguello was swollen around his right eye. Arguello staggers Pacquiao with a hard right in the 6th and pounds him along the ropes over the next 2 rounds. However, Manny regains command in rounds 9 through 11. He's just too quick for Arguello, and Alexis seems to be in serious trouble. The tide turns again in the 12th as Manny seems to tire. Arguello tags him time and again with counter rights. By the 13th, Pacquiao is in a rubbery legs. A vicious right cross from Arguello sends Pacquiao crashing to the canvas in the 13th. 30 seconds later, Arguello puts Manny to sleep with another tremendous right. Arguello rallies from behind on points to score a knockout victory.
Wow.
As far as the numbers, this was pretty close. Arguello wins 54 out of 100 simulations. Pacquiao wins 42. There are 4 draws. 39 of Arguello's 54 wins are by stoppage. Punches landed per round. Arguello 24 per round. Pacquiao 20. Connect percentage roughly the same. Overall knockdowns roughly the same. In the end, it represents a very close and competitive fight.
Yeah, I think this is a fight I would have loved to have seen. And Leonard and Mayweather could have been one of those that maybe, you in the hype and the build-up, everybody was dying for it, and it could have disappointed a little bit, as Mike pointed out with the simulation and the punch count and stuff like that. Oddly, this punch count here seems to be even lower between Arguello and Pacquiao.
That seems crazy to me.
Which, with Pacquiao's output, I'm not sure exactly how that was going on there. But I think I do agree with the result, because Arguello's just his stamina throughout his whole career and his ability, to do it all. And he was one of those guys in the 70s that really, fought a lot of competition and stuff like that. And Pacquiao is at the end of the day, what weight class was this in?
This was at 130.
At 130, okay. Then definitely this is a fight I would have wanted to have seen, just because you've got a situation where both guys are probably in their primary and best weight classes, whereas Mayweather in the last fight was out of his weight class, I think, out of his true best weight class anyway. Mike, what are your thoughts on this fight?
Well, what do you think? How many times do you think Jim Lampley would have mentioned each of their political aspirations during this fight? That's my question. I mean, how many times would that have gotten brought up? Yeah, I'm thinking minimally 3 times.
We got a few politicians here on the way too. Yeah, and that's the thing is, in this fight, you're talking about 2 guys that have their iconic position in the sport as well. As Manny, as a breakout, star from the Philippines at this
and singer.
In this day and era.
Fantastic singer.
He's back on the basketball court too, I hear. And but he's got his position in the Senate, and Arguello, before his death, was mayor of the capital of his home country there. So you've got a situation where, in-ring stuff aside, the guys went on and were trying to do stuff in the political wing, but it doesn't have anything to do with the numbers here. But I think this was, of our simulations, probably the one fight I want to see. Aside from this fight, I think the second most entertaining fight that we put together here is for the heavyweights, and here we're gonna really shake it up a little bit and head back in time, and we're gonna do Vladimir Klitschko versus the giant of his era, which was Primo Carnera. And
that's one of your favorites, Miguel.
It's not that he's my favorite, but I think he's a guy that is underrated in some ways, and his position.
Agree with you. I agree with you.
I think his position in history is really underrated in terms of he came along at a bad time because, everybody in that era after Dempsey is poo-pooed, you know, because Dempsey was such a crossover figure. But you know, what you got there was a period with no star, but part of that was, I think Carnera was a star. I think Carnera, being European, gets a really bad rap in the United States. Now, of course, there's probably some truth to the idea of fixed fights for him and a few things like that went on around him, but I don't know that you can blame him, or that you can you take away some of the credit he deserves in his career, because he fought a lot. He fought, you know, you're talking about a guy with over 100 fights as a heavyweight. You're talking about a guy who fought a lot of very good heavyweights. And when you're talking about his prime, and the moments that, you know, around the time where he was world champion and he beat Max Baer, and in that run there, you know, he was fighting in front of 45,000 people, 50,000 people, 70,000 people. And, you know, he had 70,000 people see him fight in his home of Italy. In some, I'm trying to look through my notes here, but I think he was a big star, and I think it would warrant a look at almost translating some of the European newspapers or you know, the Italian newspapers and everything there. I think that situation could bring new light to his impact in boxing. I think he was big in Europe, kind of thing. And again, the United States has a tendency to say, yeah, you know, that doesn't buy you anything here. But you know, in the long run, I think that Klitschko has a lot of that in common with him. Whereas in the United States, he may not get a lot of credit, but he's going to go down as an all-time great. Anyway, Mike, Dave, rather, go ahead and give us the business.
Okay, here we go. Klitschko versus Carnera.
And where did this take place, Dave? Was it Germany?
Let's say London.
Dude's kind of that's like a level playing field, Miguel.
Yeah. So in a battle of behemoths, Klitschko
dominated. What the drug testing is going to be like? Okay, go ahead.
Klitschko dominated from the beginning, bloodying and punishing Carnera over the first 4 rounds. He sends the ambling out to the canvas twice in the 5th, but Carnera is courageous and manages to survive. Carnera catches Klitschko with a right flush on the chin, which sends him to the canvas in the 6th. However, Vladimir recovers and punishes Carnera relentlessly along the ropes, forcing the referee to step in and stop the fight in the 7th. Klitschko wins TKO 7. And the numbers pretty one-sided. Klitschko wins 80 out of 100. Carnera only 20. 71. Klitschko's wins are by stoppage, averaging 7 rounds. Klitschko lands a ridiculous 70% of his punches, compared to only 27 for Carnera.
I can see that.
He outlands Carnera an average of 27.5 to 19 per round. The result doesn't surprise me, but I think the disparity does a little bit in how quick the stoppages occurred. I think I would have expected Carnera to hang around a little longer in these fights because, the one thing he was durable.
Well, you read the old newspaper articles, and they all say that his ability to take a punch was pretty incredible. It seemed like more, in the later rounds he'd have cardio issues, but his ability to take pain was there.
Yeah, I think that's the thing here that separates the two guys is I think it's an interesting physical matchup too because Carnera was the imposing figure of his time, but he would see Klitschko just about eye to eye, and that would be something that Carnera had not faced before, a whole hell of a lot. Whereas Klitschko, he's been facing a lot of bigger guys, guys that approach him in stature. He's facing Tyson Fury, who's actually bigger than him in this one. But then you take into account the fact that really Klitschko is a very technical fighter. Somewhere along the lines in his career when he got his chin checked and it came up short, he made a lot of adjustments towards the defense, and he's a very good defensive fighter too, and he doesn't take a lot of damage. So in technique, Klitschko, I think that's what really defines this matchup here, is the technique of Klitschko, because Carnero is not really known as a great technical fighter. The tape we have of him, show him, to be a big bruiser type that takes a lot of damage, and if he gets his shot in, watch out kind of thing. That's not a great style to take into a fight with a guy like Klitschko, who's so measured.
Right.
Yeah, how can you disagree with that? I agree. Another thing is like a lot of times you see these big guys, and like when people always said, "Oh, he was the giant of the time." Man, you go look at his pictures, him standing next to like other large people, and it's shocking just how enormous Primo was. Like even in today's day and age, where we're much bigger as people as
society in
50
general.
years ago. Primo was a monster. He really was. And usually guys like that, they get like that bully effect. As long as they're the alpha, they're always going to be dominant. But the minute they get a little, push against it, they tend to fold real quick. And Carnero, just wasn't that guy. Not only was he the big imposing figure, but he was also, an alpha male that continued pushing forward even against adversity, which you never really saw, with big guys like him, because they never really faced adversity growing up. They were always, able to kind of push through just based on their physical size.
I think that's one of the things that would tell in this matchup. Really, if it really happened 100 times, Klitschko really, in any way, and they gave him 71 stoppages, and you have to agree with the.
Carnero's just going to find his chin once.
Yeah, that's exactly my point. That's exactly. I think he's got to knock Carnero down several times, which he's capable of doing. But Carnero is going to get up. Carnero would be the type of guy who would continue to push forward, and Carnero's chance is that one punch, because we know Klitschko, when he goes down, his chin is very suspect. Whereas Carnero proved it over and over again by taking. And here's the other thing: because of size and stuff, you're fighting a bunch of littler guys. Usually a littler guy. These were professional technical fighters, also alpha males, as you said, and they were in for a fight against a guy that much bigger and stuff. They threw everything they had at this guy. You know what I mean? It's not. There wasn't any of like, well, let's exchange a little bit. I want to see how strong he is. Like, these little guys weren't asking themselves, let's test ourselves a little bit. They threw everything they had at him to try to get him out.
Fights Carnero ahead, and Miguel, how it goes. These guys all know each other, and they're all talking ringside. Oh, we got to do this. You got to do that. It's like, all right, well, now you try the body. You're fighting him next. You try the body. I'll try the head. I'll try this. I'll go southpaw. There's probably a million different ways they went at him during the course of his 100-plus fight career, and he continued to get off the canvas when he got knocked down, and continued to try to push forward, to land that big punch on his opponent, and more often than not, he did it.
Max Baer put him down. There's some controversy over how many times, but easily over 10 times it appears from the record. Max Baer put him down in their fight for the World Championship at Madison Square Garden, and rather the Madison Square Garden Bowl in Long Island City, sponsored by Madison Square Garden. But there were 60,000 people at that fight, and he got up 10 times. 10 times.
That's just crazy. That's insane.
Yeah.
And that's what, at that point, that was him, Carnero. He had earned the world championship, and he was coming in defending it. And that's the kind of, that's the way a champion wants to go out. And I think that's what happened is once the blood started flowing in the fight, because they always speak of Carnero as being I don't want to use the term gentle giant, but he definitely was a guy who I don't think liked the sport. A guy like Dempsey, liked hitting people. There are certain fighters that like Roberto Duran. He would be doing this for $5. It's in their nature and their makeup. And I think Carnero was a guy, and this is part of the reason why his history includes fixed fights and things like that. Is he's a guy that was brought along because of his size and his imposing nature, and sort of found this as his career, but it wasn't his passion. It's interesting that when the fight starts, his passion was awakened, and it's not like he lay down and gave up.
Right. And as you guys said, the X factor in this matchup is, it only takes one punch, and it's conceivable Carnera could land it on any given day.
Yeah, he's strong. You have to give him credit for the strength. He's strong enough to knock out any man, I think. And Klitschko's shown that as his thing. But I think this does show that there's a difference in the technical level of the two fighters, and you have to take your hats off to Klitschko for that in terms of technique and things. From very early on, from his Olympic days and stuff, he's always, been a very, very technical fighter and a strongly conditioned fighter as well. But really, the technique separates him from Carnera.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Well, we've been breezing along here on our podcast. We've gone through 4 of the fights in the mythical boxing style. I really enjoy the discussion that comes along with them. I like it. I think we're going to periodically, pick 4 fights out of a hat and discuss them this way because this was an interesting discussion. We've been reviewing some mythical fights, some fights of all-time greats, and against active fighters, and we're just shaking them down and see how it goes. Mayweather, I think we've come to the conclusion we'd like to see him, in a different weight class than welterweight. We had a little bit of a lopsided result in Sugar Ray Leonard's way, going Sugar Ray Leonard's way, and it's something that I don't think we can any of us really strongly disagree with. Maybe Mayweather gets a little more credit in some books, but it's a situation where he was at his best as a lightweight. In terms of Arguello and Pacquiao, with Pacquiao, this was the tightest fight of the group, and Pacquiao came in second to Arguello. In the lead, and the widest disparity was all-time great Marvin Hagler dispatching Gennady Golovkin with almost over a 90% win ratio on that matchup. And then Carnera and Klitschko, which to me, I like going way back in time because, to put guys up against modern guys, because I really think that opens up the discussion to a lot of things. But I enjoy this. I'm going to let Dave sign off, plug his site one more time, and Mike, you too. Dave, take it away.
All right. Always a pleasure, gentlemen. Appreciate being on the show. And yes, you can find me on Facebook at Mythical Boxing, and also my website is mythicalboxing at weebly.com. Hope thanks again, guys, and hope you have a great rest of the day here on Sunday.
Thank you very much, Dave. Mike, go ahead, close out. We lost Mike again. I told you that midget's rough. All right, I'm gonna sign off here, Dave. Let the editing guy take care of it later, and we won't hang out. And I'm Miguel Dorada here with the Talk and Shoot podcast. We've been talking shoot on the theme of mystical boxing, and we're going to do it again in the near future. Thanks, guys. Signing off.